It was early morning, the 3rd of June 2024. An archaeology team researching the underground city in Cappadocia's Göreme region came face to face with a previously undiscovered room on the 8th level. The team leader, 44-year-old Dr. Ayhan Kaya, was brushing dust from the entrance when he noticed something glimmering inside. He held his torch toward the darkness. There, in the center of the shadowed room, stood a statue of white marble, approximately 1 meter tall. "There's a statue here," said Ayhan, turning to his team. His assistant, 31-year-old archaeologist Melissa Arslan, came to his side immediately. Together they stepped carefully into the room. It was small, roughly 3 meters across. The ceiling was low. The walls were carved from smooth-cut rock. A typical Cappadocian underground chamber. But the only object in the room was the statue. It depicted a human figure, standing upright, arms at its sides, head tilted slightly forward. The facial expression was one of deep calm. The eyes were closed, yet the detail was extraordinary. Every finger, every fold of fabric had been worked with precision and care. The figure wore a long robe. It resembled a monk or a priest. "Remarkable craftsmanship. Could be Roman period, perhaps Byzantine," said Melis. At the base of the statue was an inscription, ancient Greek. Ayhan leaned in and read it aloud. "He who sees the unseen watches. He who does not watch is lost." He straightened up. "A strange sentence. What does it mean?" "Perhaps a warning," said Melis. "Or a prayer." They photographed the statue, measured it, documented everything. Then they left it in place. Removing any object from the underground city required special permission. The Ministry of Culture had to be notified first and official approval obtained. "Tomorrow we file the application. We'll transfer the statue to the museum," said Ayhan. The following morning, the team descended again for official documentation. But when they opened the door, they all stopped dead. The statue was in a different place. The day before, it had stood in the exact center of the room. Now it was in the right-hand corner. It had moved approximately 2 meters. "Wait, this was in the middle yesterday, I'm certain," said Ayhan. "Maybe you're mistaken. Maybe it was always in the corner," said Melis. But Ayhan looked at the photographs from the previous day. The statue was clearly in the center. The doorway was visible in the background. The distance could be measured precisely. "No, look at the photo. It was in the middle. Now it's in the corner. Who moved it?" said Ayhan. The team looked at one another. Nobody had come here during the night. The underground city closed at 6 in the evening and opened at 8 in the morning. Between those hours, only security personnel were present. And the security guards never descended to the 8th level. They checked only the entrance floor. "Maybe there was a small earthquake. The statue slid," said one of the assistants. But there had been no recorded earthquake in Cappadocia that night. No record of any kind. "Maybe we're misremembering. Collective false memory," said Melis. But the photographs did not lie. The statue had unquestionably moved. Strange as it was, they continued working. They remeasured the statue, took more photographs, and left the underground city that evening. On the third morning, they entered the room to find the statue in a different place again. This time, it was in the left-hand corner, the opposite side. Another 2 meters. Ayhan was genuinely unsettled now. "This isn't normal. Something is happening here. Either someone is playing a joke on us or there is something else entirely going on." "Let's set up cameras," said Melis. "We'll record through the night, then we'll see what's happening." That afternoon, they installed 3 cameras in the room. Battery-powered, night vision capable, motion sensor equipped, covering different angles. They also laid a simple trap. They scattered white powder around the base of the statue. If it moved, it would leave tracks. "Tomorrow morning we checked the footage. We solved the mystery of the moving statue," said Ayhan. On the 4th morning, the team arrived at the room with anticipation. The cameras were still in position. But the statue had moved again. This time it was beside the door, as though it were trying to leave. And even more unsettling, in the white powder there was not a single footprint, not one mark, not one line. The statue had moved as if it had glided through the air. "This is impossible," said Melis. They checked the cameras. They transferred the footage to a laptop and began watching. 9 hours of recording, from 9 in the evening until 7 in the morning. In the beginning, there was no movement at all. The statue simply stood there, motionless in the dark room. Then, at 2 in the morning, something happened. The image flickered for a moment, static interference. A few seconds later, it cleared, and the statue was now in a different place, beside the door. Rewind it, slow it down, said Ayhan. They watched it in slow motion. The static began, the image pixelated. And right at that moment, there was an extremely rapid movement. Blurred, unclear, but the statue appeared to lift from its position. Not sliding, not walking, not crawling, as though it had simply teleported from one place to another. Then the static ended. The statue was in its new position. All three cameras had recorded the same thing, the same static at the same moment, the same blurred movement. Could it be electromagnetic interference? Perhaps there's a magnetic field underground that's affecting the cameras, said Melis. But the statue really did move. We can see it. The static only affected the recording. The physical movement is real. On the fifth day, they added more cameras, 6 of them covering every angle, plus an electromagnetic field meter, a temperature sensor, a vibration detector, every kind of scientific instrument they could gather. On the sixth morning, the result was the same. The statue had moved. This time, it had returned to the center of the room, back to its starting position, directly in the middle. The cameras had shown the same static as before, but this time the electromagnetic meter had registered something. At 2 in the morning, a powerful electromagnetic pulse. Very brief, less than 1 second, but intense. Its frequency, 7.3 Hz, Schumann resonance, the natural frequency of the Earth. Perhaps the underground rock is creating a natural resonance. At night, this resonance grows stronger, causing the statue to vibrate and shift, said Melis. But the theory was insufficient, because the statue wasn't vibrating. It was relocating from one moment to the next, without sliding, without being lifted, without any perceptible mechanism. Ayhan tried a different approach. Maybe someone really is coming here, sneaking in at night, moving the statue, and knocking out the cameras with an electromagnetic device. They checked the security records, entry and exit logs for the underground city. Nobody had entered during the night. The security guard had stood at the entrance gate until morning. Nobody had passed. Then there's someone hiding inside, concealing themselves, coming out at night, moving the statue, said Melis. But every room, every corridor of the underground city had been checked. There was no one. Hiding places were extremely limited. Everything was under observation. On the seventh day, Ayhan made a decision. Tonight I'm staying in the room. I'll observe it directly. If the statue moves, I'll see it happen. And if someone or something is responsible, I'll stop it. But it could be dangerous if there's something supernatural, said Melis. There's no such thing as supernatural. Everything has a scientific explanation. I'll find it. That night, Ayhan made camp in the room. Sleeping bag, torch, camera, and plenty of coffee. He would stay awake until morning. Until 9 in the evening, nothing happened. The statue remained where it was. Ayhan read, took notes, took photographs. At 11, he felt a mild heaviness settling over him. His head was growing thick. I need coffee. He poured from his flask and drank, but his eyes were still growing heavy. Perhaps the oxygen is dropping. Underground, in closed space. Maybe the ventilation is insufficient, he thought. But the oxygen meter read normal. At midnight, Ayhan was deeply tired. Just a few minutes rest. I'll set an alarm. 5 minutes and I'll be awake again. He set his phone alarm, closed his eyes and fell asleep. At 2 o'clock, the alarm went off. Ayhan woke and looked around. The statue had moved. It was now in the corner. No, how is that possible? I was here. He looked at his phone. It was 2 o'clock. The alarm was set for 2, but he had made an error. Instead of setting it for 2:10, he had set it for 2, meaning the alarm had been set 2 hours ahead. He had slept for 2 hours. Damn it, 2 hours. And that's when the statue moved. He checked the cameras. They were recording. When he looked at the footage, he saw the same thing again. At 2 in the morning, static, blurred transition, the statue from its position to the corner. And something else, something strange. Ayhan himself was visible in the recording, asleep, motionless. But at the moment the statue moved, Ayhan's body had shuddered slightly, as though he were dreaming. Perhaps the electromagnetic field is affecting me too, causing me to fall asleep at the same moment it moves the statue, he thought. But this explanation was also insufficient. How could an electromagnetic field physically lift and relocate a marble statue? On the 8th morning, Ayhan told the team everything. This statue is not following the laws of physics as we know them, but there has to be an explanation. Perhaps a very rare phenomenon, a quantum effect, or an unknown technology. Maybe the statue isn't just a statue, said Melis. Maybe there's a mechanism inside, an ancient technology, some kind of motor or timer that activates at 2 in the morning. They decided to examine the statue with great care. They took x rays, applied ultrasound tomography, every available method to see inside. The result was unambiguous. The statue was completely solid, no hollow spaces, no mechanism, simply marble, one single piece. Then how is it moving? Said Ayhan. Maybe it isn't, said Melis quietly. What do you mean it isn't moving? We have photographs, we have video. Yes, but maybe our perception is changing. Maybe the statue stays in the same place and we simply perceive it as being somewhere different, a kind of optical illusion or a psychological effect. But this too failed to explain matters, because the cameras recorded the same thing. Not only the human eye, machines too. On the ninth day, Ayhan called in a physicist, Dr. Cem Yilmaz, quantum physics specialist from Ankara University. Cem was 48 years old, a theoretical physicist who was drawn to strange phenomena. Cem examined the statue, watched the recordings, analyzed the data. He then proposed a theory. This could be the quantum observer effect. In quantum mechanics, a particle that is not observed exists in a state of superposition, meaning it can be in multiple places simultaneously. But when observed, it collapses to a single position. Perhaps this statue is a quantum object. When observed, it is in one place. When unobserved, it exists in multiple places simultaneously. And the moment observation ends, it collapses randomly to a new position. But the statue is a macroscopic object, said Ayhan. Quantum effects are observed only at the subatomic level. In an object this large, it's impossible. Under normal conditions, yes, but perhaps this statue is special. Perhaps the material used in its construction maintains quantum coherence. Or perhaps the particular conditions underground, isolation, low temperature, electromagnetic field, make the quantum effect possible in large objects. Can we test it? Continuous observation. If we watch it without stopping, will it refuse to move? Asked Melis. Theoretically, yes. The quantum Zeno effect. Continuous observation freezes the system. It prevents change, said Cem. At night, the team took turns watching the statue. At every moment, at least one person was looking directly at it. The cameras recorded without interruption. In the morning, the result was astonishing. The statue had not moved. It had remained in exactly the same position throughout the entire night. The quantum Zeno effect works. Continuous observation froze it. This is conclusive proof. The statue is a quantum object, said Cem with excitement. On the 11th day, they conducted another experiment. They surrounded the statue with mirrors. This way, they could observe it through reflections without looking directly at it. Technically, observation would still occur, but it would be indirect. That night, no one looked directly at the statue. They watched only its reflections in the mirrors. In the morning, the statue had moved again. So, indirect observation is not sufficient. Direct, conscious observation is required, said Cem. But this brings consciousness into quantum physics. That's extremely radical. Most physicists won't accept it, said Ayhan. I know, but perhaps consciousness genuinely plays a role in quantum collapse, and perhaps this statue is proving it. On the 12th day, they researched the historical origins of the statue. Had any such statue ever been recorded in Cappadocia before? They found a document from the Byzantine period, a monk's diary, written in Greek from the 12th century. It made reference to what it called the unseen statue. In the depths of the underground city, there is a sacred statue, but no one can observe it directly, for it changes position in the blink of an eye. Some say it is the work of angels, but I believe it is a diabolical enchantment. Who made it, I do not know, but it is old, very old, perhaps from the Phrygians, perhaps older still. The Phrygians lived in Cappadocia in the 8th century BC. Perhaps the statue dates from them, said Ayhan. They researched the Phrygians. Their religion centered on the cults of Cybele and Attis, but they held one additional distinctive belief, the invisible God. According to the Phrygians, the true God could not be observed, for observation constrains the divine. But when unobserved, the God is everywhere, infinite, free. Perhaps this statue embodies that belief, said Melis, reading from an ancient text. When observed, in one place, when unobserved, everywhere. It symbolizes the nature of the divine. The statue represents what cannot be seen, said Jem. On the 13th day, they called in another professor, Professor Deniz Akar, 62 years old, expert in Phrygian culture. Deniz examined the statue at length. This is unmistakably Phrygian in style. The craftsmanship is from the 7th or 8th century BC. The facial expression resembles the priests of Cybele. But there's something strange. The statue's eyes are closed. In Phrygian sculpture, the eyes are normally open, but these are closed, as though the statue itself is saying, I am not watching, and neither are you. Perhaps the statue isn't observing the observer, and that is precisely why it can maintain its quantum state, said Jem. On the 14th day, they decided to remove the statue from the underground city. They would take it to the museum and conduct further tests in a controlled environment. But when they tried to lift it, they discovered something. The statue was extraordinarily heavy, far heavier than ordinary marble. 4 people could barely manage it. Marble weighs 2.7 tons per cubic meter. This statue is smaller than 1 cubic meter, but its weight is at least 500 kilograms. Far too much, said Ayhan. Maybe there's a dense material inside, lead or gold, said Melis. But the X-rays had already shown that the interior was not hollow. The statue was solid, yet denser than normal marble, anomalous. They transported the statue to the museum inside a specially constructed case. It was placed in a dedicated room at the Cappadocia Archaeological Museum. Cameras recorded continuously from every angle. On the first night in the museum, the statue did not move. It remained in the same position until morning. Perhaps the particular conditions of the underground city were necessary. Here, it cannot move, said Ayhan. But on the second night, it moved. Again at 2 in the morning. Static, blurred transition, new position. So location is irrelevant. The phenomenon is intrinsic to the statue itself, said Jem. On the 15th day, the international media got wind of the story. A quantum statue discovered in Turkey. It moves when unobserved. The scientific world divided. Some were electrified. Macroscopic quantum phenomenon. A revolution. Others were skeptical. A hoax. A trick. It cannot be real. Physicists arrived from MIT, Harvard, and Oxford. They ran their own tests, recorded with their own cameras, and they all saw the same result. The statue moved when it was not being observed. Nature published a special paper, the Cappadocia statue, macroscopic proof of the quantum observer effect? But still, there was no explanation. How was it happening? On the 16th day, a quantum computing specialist offered a different theory. Perhaps the statue is a quantum computer, an ancient technology. The crystalline structure within it performs quantum computations and converts the result into physical movement. They searched for crystalline structures inside the statue, under microscope, then electron microscope, and they found them. Extremely fine, nanometer-scale crystal arrays. Not natural, artificial, but who had made them? In the 7th century BC? Perhaps an ancient civilization, more advanced than we are, lost to history, but they left behind their works, said Jem. Or perhaps a technology that transcends time, buried in the future, discovered in the past, said another scientist. Speculation multiplied, but there was no definitive answer. On the 17th day, they called in a philosopher, Professor Elif Özdemir, specialist in consciousness and reality. Perhaps the question itself is wrong, she said. Instead of asking how it moves, we should be asking why it moves. What do you mean why? Said Ayhan. Perhaps the statue has a purpose, a message. It wants to teach us something about reality, about the relationship between observation and existence. As Berkeley said, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived. Perhaps the statue is demonstrating this. When it is not observed, its mode of being changes. But that's philosophical, not scientific, said Ayhan. Quantum mechanics brings philosophy and science together. The Copenhagen interpretation places the observer at the very center. Perhaps this statue is physically validating that interpretation. On the 20th day, a significant decision was made. They would keep the statue under continuous observation, 24 hours a day, human observers taking turns, without interruption. observation. If the quantum Zeno effect held true, the statue would never move again. The experiment ran for 1 week. The team grew exhausted, suffered from sleep deprivation, but they continued. The result? The statue did not move for an entire week. It was frozen. The quantum Zeno effect works. This is conclusive proof. The statue is a quantum object, said Jem. But on the 27th day, they stopped the observation. Only cameras remained, no human observers. That night, the statue moved violently, from corner to corner, then to the center, then to the door, as though it were celebrating its freedom, as though it were finally saying, "At last, I am alone." The statue wants to escape observation. It wants to be free, said Elif. But the statue is inanimate. It cannot have desires, said Ayhan. Perhaps it is not inanimate. Perhaps there is some form of consciousness within it, very primitive, but present, and it wants only one thing, not to be watched. On the 28th day, an ethical problem was debated. Was it ethical to keep the statue under continuous observation? If it truly possessed some form of consciousness, could this constitute a form of suffering? Some were dismissive. The statue is just a stone. It has no consciousness. There's nothing to be concerned about. Others objected. But if it does have consciousness, we cannot take the risk. We must respect its freedom. Eventually, a compromise was reached. They would observe the statue at specific hours during the day, but leave it alone at night. Freedom hours. Under this arrangement, the statue moved at night. During the day, while people watched, it stood still. A balance had been established. Science and ethics. Observation and freedom. On the 30th day, they examined the inscription at the base of the statue more carefully. Ancient Greek. When a more detailed translation was undertaken, an additional line was discovered at the very bottom of the base, written in extremely small letters. "I exist not to be seen, but to be understood. He who watches me knows. He who sets me free learns." "Learns what?" asked Melis. "Perhaps the nature of reality," said Elif. "The relationship between observation and existence. The meaning of freedom." On the 35th day, one more small experiment occurred. A 7-year-old girl, whose family had come to visit the museum, looked at the statue. She was not surprised. She was not frightened. She simply smiled. "It wants to play," she said. "Play what?" her mother asked. "Hide and seek. When we are not looking, it hides. When we look, we find it. It's playing a game." A simple explanation, childlike, but perhaps the truest of all. "Maybe the statue is simply playing with us," said Jem, smiling. "Quantum mechanics is just a game. The universe's game of hide and seek." On the 40th day, a documentary team arrived, the BBC. They were making a film titled The Quantum Statue: What is Reality? The statue was broadcast live to audiences around the world. Cameras recorded continuously. Millions of people were watching. Would the statue move? Throughout the night, the observation was overwhelmingly intense. Not just cameras, millions of people sat at their screens watching the statue. Indirect observation, but vast in scale. That night, the statue did not move. It remained in the same position all night long. Collective observation is more powerful. Millions of conscious minds froze the statue, said Jem. This generated a sweeping global debate. Does consciousness create reality? Does observation determine existence? Philosophers, physicists, theologians all weighed in. And the Cappadocia statue became the focal point of the entire discussion. On the 50th day, a decision was made regarding the statue. It would be kept in a dedicated room. Only researchers could visit it during specific hours, but at night it would be left entirely alone. Not even a camera would remain. Full freedom for the statue, the right to exist unobserved, said the ethics committee. On the 60th day, one final test was conducted. They placed another statue beside it, the same size, but ordinary marble, a control group. If the phenomenon arose from electromagnetic fields or environmental conditions, the second statue should move as well. They waited 1 week. The second statue did not move at all. Only the Cappadocia statue moved. So it's unique, specific to this statue. It exists nowhere else, said Ayhan. On the 70th day, another theory emerged. Perhaps there is an ancient spirit within the statue, a being, passive when observed, active when unobserved. But this was not science, it was metaphysics, and science did not favor metaphysics. On the 80th day, Ayhan was exhausted. 3 months. We've been wrestling with this statue for 3 months and still there's no definitive answer. Perhaps some things cannot be explained. Perhaps the mystery should remain as a mystery. But science should explain everything. That's our purpose, said Melis. No, science asks questions, but not every question has an answer. Some mysteries endure, and that is beautiful. Because curiosity must never end, said Ayhan. On the 90th day, the statue was placed in its permanent home, a dedicated section of the museum. The room was named the Quantum Chamber. Visitors could enter during specific hours and see the statue, but they could never look for long, a maximum of 5 minutes, and then they had to leave. The statue's right to rest, moments free from observation, said the museum director. At night there would be no cameras at all, the statue would be entirely its own. On the 100th day, the museum opened a special exhibition, Observation and Existence, the Cappadocia Statue Exhibition. The exhibition told the story of the statue, its discovery, its movements, the tests, the theories, everything. But the statue itself stood in a simple room, white walls, the statue alone, and a single line of text. When observed, this statue is here. When unobserved, perhaps somewhere else, perhaps everywhere, perhaps nowhere, we do not know. And perhaps we are not meant to know, for some mysteries must not be solved, they must only be respected. By 2025, the Cappadocia statue had become famous throughout the world. Hundreds of thousands of visitors came every year to see it, to try to understand it. Some believed, a quantum miracle, proof offered by science. Some were skeptical, there must be a trick, this cannot be real. But everyone was affected. One visitor said, "When I look at the statue, I think about myself. Am I the one being observed or the one doing the observing? And when I stop watching, do things continue to exist?" Philosophical questions, existential questions. The statue was triggering them all. In 2027, another statue resembling it was found, in Egypt. A different style, but the same phenomenon. It moved when unobserved. Then one in Greece, then China. Similar statues were discovered in different corners of the world, one by one. Perhaps an ancient civilization understood this global quantum phenomenon, and they created these statues as a message for future generations, said Jem. In 2030, a quantum physicist finally developed a comprehensive theory, a complete explanation. The statues were quantum entangled, both with each other and with the observer. When observed, the wave function collapsed, fixed in a single position. But the moment observation ended, it re-entered superposition and collapsed randomly to a new position. Macroscopic quantum entanglement, observed for the first time. But again a question, how? How had ancient people created quantum entanglement? Answer, unknown. In 2035, Ayhan retired at the age of 65, but he did not abandon the statue. Every week he came to the museum. "Hello, old friend," he would say to the statue. "Where are you today? In the same place? Or did you travel last night?" The statue never answered, of course, but Ayhan felt as though it did. One day in the museum, a young girl approached him, 18 years old, a physics student. "Professor Kaya, it's because of you that I began studying physics. I read the story of the statue and was moved by it. Now I study quantum mechanics. Thank you." Ayhan smiled. "Thank the statue. It is the real teacher. I was simply the one who found it." In 2040, one final discovery was made about the statue. The inscription at its base held a deeper meaning, a cryptogram, an encoded message. They decoded it. The message read, "The universe is an act of observation. Every glance a creation. Every blink an erasure. You are not the observer of the universe. You are the universe itself. In watching me, you watch yourself. In setting me free, you set yourself free. Remember, reality is not fixed, it is fluid, and you are part of the flow." A profound message, philosophical, mystical, yet perfectly aligned with quantum physics. In 2045, the museum celebrated the 20th anniversary of the statue's discovery. 20 years. For 20 years, the statue had been in the museum. And still, when unobserved, it moved. It had never stopped, it had never tired, as though it possessed boundless, inexhaustible energy. Perhaps quantum energy, energy from the vacuum, zero-point energy, inexhaustible, said a physicist. At the ceremony, Ayhan gave a speech. He was 76 years old now, but his mind remained sharp. 20 years ago, when I found this statue, I was searching for an answer. I asked, how does it move? But 20 years later, I am asking a different question. Why does it move? The answer, to teach us something. Reality depends on perception, observation creates, and freedom lies in not watching. Sometimes the deepest knowledge is hidden in the act of not looking. I love this statue because it gave me this lesson. May it now give the same lesson to all of you. The applause fell away and people wept. The statue was not merely a stone, it was a teacher. In 2050, Ayhan passed away. He was 81 years old. It was a peaceful death. His final words to his family: visit the statue, it will remind you of me. After his funeral, the museum placed a plaque before the statue. To Dr. Ayhan Kaya, the man who found the statue, the scientist who loved mystery. 1980-2050. And something strange occurred. On the night of Ayhan's funeral, the statue moved wildly, to every corner of the room, as though it were dancing, as though it were saying, farewell, old friend. The cameras recorded it, but no one could explain it. In 2060, artificial intelligence systems began examining the statue. Supercomputers, quantum simulations. Perhaps artificial intelligence could solve what human minds could not. But artificial intelligence was also baffled. The statue follows all known laws of physics and simultaneously violates them. A paradox, inexplicable. Perhaps some mysteries must never be solved. In 2075, the museum launched a digital experience, virtual reality. People could visit the statue from their own homes wearing VR headsets. But was virtual observation the same as real observation? Would it freeze the statue? They tested it. No. Virtual observation had no effect. The statue moved regardless. So physical presence is necessary. Consciousness cannot exist only in digital form. It must reside in a body, said a scientist. In 2080, the statue marked 66 years since its discovery, and still it was a mystery. But by now, no one was trying to solve it. They simply showed it respect. They visited. They meditated. The statue has become a temple of observation. People come here to question their own existence, said the museum director. One final property of the statue was discovered. People who looked at it for an extended time experienced an inner transformation. Mental, emotional. I become more conscious. I inhabit the present moment. Observation is not merely seeing, it is being, said one visitor. Perhaps this was the statue's true purpose, to make people more conscious, to remind them of the power of observation, and most importantly, to teach them sometimes not to look. Because freedom lay in not watching, in releasing control, in trust. Now I want to ask you one final thing. What do you think about this story? Is reality dependent on observation? Do things change when you look away? What are your thoughts on the relationship between quantum mechanics and consciousness? Perhaps there are things in your own life that have changed when you were not watching. Would you share them? If you enjoy stories about quantum mysteries, the observer effect, the nature of reality, and phenomena that resist explanation, don't forget to subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our new videos. Because sometimes the deepest truth is hidden in the act of not looking. Until the next video.